Welcome. Our webinar today, all about our Caucasus Explorer program happening at the end of September, early October next year to Georgia and Armenia. So let's dive right in. And Paula, let's keep an eye for Katuna. As I said, I just spoke to her and she said she had all of the login details. So hopefully she's going to join us any moment now from Georgia. A couple of quick words about Wheel and Anchor, and if you're a regular attendee of our webinars, you can just go on mute put me on mute for a minute because you've heard this time and time again. But for the benefit of our new members, what Wheel and Anchor is all about. We are a travel community consisting of members from all across Canada. And the idea was inspired some years back. I have been organizing trips for Canadians to points all over the globe for 32 years, 33 years now. I'm starting to lose count. And in all of that time of organizing trips, what I really noticed was the dynamic that exists when you get people who are like-minded. As Canadians, naturally, we have a like-minded sense of doing things. And I think that all of us, you've probably had that experience yourself of being out on a trip and you see, folks from other parts of the world who may not be as like-minded. and we all want to go to a place to learn and the culture, to appreciate what these regions of the world are all about. And so it's like this soft touch. You want to be inquisitive, you want to learn, you want to talk to people, you want to enjoy the company of your other people on the trip who have the same sort of point of view and the same attitude. And it's this dynamic, this vibe that sets us apart from most organized tour companies, because we really focus on this dynamic of we're just going to have a lot of fun and we're going to learn and we're going to do stuff together. It's like a combined adventure, like going with a bunch of friends. That's who we are at Wheel and Anchor. And so my goal is that in doing this, we become well-traveled. And, when we have the ability, when you connect with other people and you're able to share those experiences that you've had and talk about them after the fact. And so many of our members get together, and one of these days we will get back to hosting events here in Canada to have some laughs and share a glass of wine over all these great memories. And again, that's the benefit of travel. I always say travel starts, when you start thinking about the trip and dreaming, and then you book, and then the anticipation, and then the trip happens itself, which is the smallest part of the experience of travel, because that's the couple of weeks that you're in destination. And then after the fact, you think about it, you think about all those great experiences, you take that with you for the rest of your life. And so, our goal is to make those experiences as wonderful as possible. So I will just briefly introduce our team. My name is Gordon Dreger. I am the founder of Wheel and Anchor and curator of all of our trips here at Wheel and Anchor. And I have a wonderful team of people, and in particular, those who you will come in touch with, specifically Paula. Good morning, Paula, up in the Ottawa Valley, and Barb, who's here in the GTA, who are the wonderful people who make sure that you get your questions answered, make sure you get all booked for our trips, and then they are joined by a bunch of others who I work with to make sure that we can deliver these great experiences. And finally, Katuna, who is hopefully maybe dialing in to our web.
I just messaged you. She's in there.
Oh, she's in there. Oh, okay, great. Okay, great. All right, Katuna. There she is. All right. I see her. Katuna, just one second. I'm going to make you into a panelist so we can see you. So good. So Katuna is who I met some years ago, is from Georgia. Hello, Katuna. Good morning. Oh, that's a picture of you. Are you there? Katuna? We can't hear you yet.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Yes.
Very good. Hello to everyone.
Good morning. Well, good evening for you, because you are in Tbilisi right now. Is that right?
Yes, right. It's 7 p.m. here now.
7 p.m. in Tbilisi. So yeah, a little bit of a time change there. Khatuna, just say a couple of words. I just introduced you as our local partner, our local representative there in Georgia. Why don't you just tell our members a bit about, who you are and what you do for ourselves and for other guests coming to Georgia?
Well, we make sure that everything goes smoothly. Together with you, we plan the itinerary that is the best for your customers, and then we are in charge of delivering these services at their utmost. So when the customers land in Georgia and they are going to have Georgia-Armenia trip, we make sure that they have the great memories with them, that they learn a lot about the countries, their cultures, history, traditions, and etc. So actually, our job is to take care of the customers while they are here in our countries.
Exactly. So our customers are our members, and as I say, Khatuna and I met years ago, and I'm excited that we are going to be working together to bring you this amazing trip through Georgia and Armenia. So between Khatuna and I, we're going to take you on a little digital tour of some of the highlights of these two great countries that, as I say, we had the pleasure of discovering before. So that is our agenda today. And I just wanted to share a couple of pictures from our last trip to which is all the way back in 2018. It's been 5 years ago. It seems like yesterday. And we had a wonderful group of members who joined us to Georgia and Armenia. This is a picture from Peasant Tears Winery, which is also in our itinerary in the Kakheti Valley. And you can see all the smiling faces. Here we are at the Vardzia Caves, which was another stop on the tour I'll tell you about. And one of the fun things we did, one of the things we tried to do on our Wheel and Anchor trips is be a little bit spontaneous. And we actually had an opportunity to go ziplining at the fortress of Signagi in Kakheti. And it was like literally one of those, oh, I see a zip line. Who wants to go? And I, some of the guests looked at me like, are you joking me? But it actually ended up that I think almost everybody went, and we had an abs. So instead of arriving by minibus, we arrived in by a zip line, and we zipped into town, and it was it was a memorable moment. In any event, let's carry on. And with Khatuna, as I say, I'm going to share with you about this amazing country, the amazing landscapes. So the program, so if you haven't already done so, you might want to do a little Google mapping, because even our inset here, it just doesn't sort of give you the big picture of where we are. But if you think about the Black Sea and the Caucasus mountain range, which runs basically all along the north shore of the Black Sea through southern Russia here, you have Turkey down here, you have Iran over here, and in the middle you have these three countries, in particular Georgia, Armenia, and to the east over here is Azerbaijan, which we're not visiting on this trip. We will start by flying into the capital of Georgia, Tbilisi, and here we're going to actually head right over to the south, basically the eastern part of the country, which is known as the Kakheti, or the Alazani Valley. This is the heart of winemaking in the world, and I'll tell you about all that in a second. We're going to spend a few days exploring this incredible valley and all of the food and the wine and so on that goes with it. We're then going to head back to Tbilisi, where we're going to spend 4 nights in the city. I think last time we went, we spent only 2. And it was just not enough. People couldn't get enough of this town because it's such a lively, vibrant, and it's a different place than other cities in Europe. We'll then go up to the north to a town called Kazbegi, which is on close to the border to Russia, completely safe. Don't worry about that. But this is now in the high Caucasus Mountains, and we're going to have a wonderful view of Mount Kazbegi from here, and we'll actually go up to a cathedral. We're then going to go via Gori, which is actually a birthplace of Stalin, over to Borjomi. So now we're more in the central part of Georgia. We're going to spend a couple of nights here, and then visit the Vardzia Caves as we make our way from Borjomi via Akhaltsikhe down to Gyumri. So we're going to cross the border here in into Armenia. We're going to have a couple of nights in Gyumri, which is the cultural capital and second biggest city of Armenia, and then head down to Yerevan, which is the capital, and we'll spend our last few days here, and you'll get to learn a lot about Armenia. A lot of us have a lot of connections, a lot of Armenian people that live in Canada, and so, but you know, what do we know about this country? Well, that's the purpose of this trip. So let's jump right in. First of all, talking about getting over there, because I'll touch on this point right now. There aren't tons of flights. I mean, there are flights from Georgia to Turkey and to other places in sort of the Middle East to the south. From Europe, you end up with sort of funny times. So you generally end up arriving like in the wee hours of the morning. That's kind of how it is. It's just one of the things that we just have to contend with. But you can quite easily fly in a single hop connection via Vienna or Frankfurt, for example, directly, as I say, from Canada directly into one of those hubs, and then continuing on to my brain went blank for a second. Continuing on to Tbilisi, we'll be picked up in Tbilisi, and as I mentioned, then we're then going to head out to Tsinandali. We're going to be staying on the Tsinandali estate for a few days. I'm going to stop talking for a second. Katuna, why is the Kakheti Valley in this part of Georgia so interesting for people to visit?
Well, according to the scientists, Kakheti is a place where the wine was first made in the world about 8,000 years ago. So until now, according to the excavations, Kakheti still remains the first place in the world that made wine. And we still practice the old tradition of winemaking. We still store wine underground in the huge clay jars. And Kakheti is the starting point for all of that. Well, besides that, of course, Kakheti has beautiful valleys and beautiful Great Caucasus Mountains topping its horizons. And together with wine, delicious food, nature, and the people who are very welcoming, it makes really a wonderful stay for the foreign guests.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, it's that combination of factors. This is kind of like the breadbasket of Georgia. And correct me if I'm wrong, Katuna, but when we learned there that that actually Georgia largely did not adopt a lot of fertilizers. So a lot of the produce that's produced there and always has been organic. Is that correct?
Yes, true. The bigger wineries, they, of course, they do this in a modern way. And we have some wines that are just like done just like in the other parts of the world. But generally, as you have mentioned, it's absolutely true that we try to be organic, to stay organic, and to do it in a very natural way.
Yeah, exactly. And so the wine for sure, but also, you know, all of the produce. And I remember I remember distinctly the tomatoes I ate in Georgia. I've never eaten such great tomatoes anywhere in the world. It's really, really amazing.
Everyone mentions that. Sorry to interrupt, but actually about the tomatoes, it's a kind of a myth that Kakhetian tomatoes are the sweetest that people try.
Yeah, it's really amazing. The food, by the way, in Georgia is phenomenal, and you try things, a lot of different things that you just don't find anywhere else. I can remember things like the kinkali, these dumplings that they do that are filled with soup. Oh my God, it's so good. And so it's not something you come across. And there's also and I know that some of our members, you know, may not, but the portions are always huge. In fact, we specifically requested only 2 meals on this trip because I'll tell you, there's no way you can eat 3 meals a day in Georgia, because there's always massive quantities, and everything is tastier than the next. Let's talk a little bit more about about this region, about Kakheti. We're going to be doing some wine tasting. We're going to obviously see some of the farming and so on and so forth. We're going to see Signagi, and this is the town, as I say, that when we were there the last time, we ziplined across a small valley to get into the town. What makes this town so interesting and so special?
Signagi is a town that is located on top of a mountain. And the main factor for its wonderful views is the wall that it is nestled in. So actually you go to a fortified town which has the beautiful towers that you can climb up and have that great view over the Alazani River Valley. At the end you see the great Caucasus Mountains, but inside the town you get this feeling of being somewhere in the Middle Ages, with cobbled street, colored wooden carved balconies, and then those sandstone built churches around. So it's the town, its beauty, and the feeling it brings to you that you are somewhere in the world that really loves you, and that's why the town is called the town of love as well.
Exactly. It's the city of love. It also has this huge wall around it, a 4-kilometer long defensive wall with towers and gates. So it's quite an amazing site. And this is also the spot where we have Peasantier's Winery, which I will remember distinctly because if I remember, the owner of the vineyard is an English chap with his wife who's local, and have developed this organic winery, and you know, they do a food and wine tasting that is just, again, it sticks out in my mind. That's why I showed you the picture at the beginning. This is the kind of experience that we have here. So it'll be a great way to start because we'll be doing a lot of eating, a lot of wine tasting, a lot of but we'll also have time to sort of just relax and settle in after the journey over. We'll then get into the vibrant city of Tbilisi, and they call it Paris of the East. How would you describe it, Khatun? I mean, you are from there. I love this town. I'm sorry, this city. But what would you say to our members?
Tbilisi is, for me, the crossroad for Asia and Europe. So geographically, we might be in Asia, but the Georgian soul is more Western oriented. And in this town, which became the capital in the 4th century, you can see all the influences of the history that it went through. So you can see Arab, Turkish, Byzantine, or Persian influences. And of course, these all combined with the Georgian character. So once you are there, you get this feel of being in a very bustling city, alive, that is alive even at night hours. And the old architecture combined with the 19th century architecture, which already has its beauty from Europe, it all makes the town to be outstanding. So everyone loves their town, but you know, wherever I go, when I come back, it feels like we belong here. So all the Tbilisians, they love their city, and they really like the fact that they were born here.
Absolutely. And what you'll see in Tbilisi, because obviously a lot has happened since, you know, the fall of the Soviet Union ago, which is obviously, since Perestroika, the 30 years ago. And so you have the remnants of the pre-Soviet time. Obviously, you have these incredible Orthodox churches. You see one of them on the picture back here. You also have some very modern structures like this glass bridge that they have over the river that you can see in the picture here. And so again, like this mix between old and new, which makes Tbilisi so interesting. We will see a fair number of churches, but what I found, because you know, I always think about you know, our rule about ABC tours, and I won't do the translation for those that don't know what I'm talking about. But what I find particularly in Georgia is it's the situation of these things that are on a rocky outcrop. This one here is sort of on this cliff in the middle of of Tbilisi, and then you have a view, which maybe we have another photograph of looking over to Tbilisi. So you look over here, and all of these colorful balconies that comprise the old town of Tbilisi. This is the middle of town, the fortress in the back. The views are really very different, and I think as interesting and as diverse as you'll find in any city. As I mentioned, we've allocated 4 nights here because there's really so much to see and so much to just soak in that I felt the last time that we went, we felt a little bit rushed because it's like, oh, we didn't get a chance to do this and this and this and this. So you'll have lots of time. Tell us a few of the things that folks will be able to do while visiting Tbilisi. We'll obviously have a guided tour. You'll get oriented into what is where. There's lots of pedestrian streets in the old town. But Khatuna, what are some of the things that guests, visitors like to do?
Well, as you mentioned, first of all, we'll have this classic tour where we will get the orientation of what is and where they are. And we'll see the oldest part of the town. And then on the free days, of course, the guide and the leaders, they will be there to suggest the options. But from this point of view, we could do the beautiful museums, which are the history museums housing the golden artifacts from the excavations, prehistoric times, I mean. And then there is this ethnographic open-air museum that is beautiful, with all the houses brought from different parts of Georgia and combined in one garden. Then we have Dry Bridge Flea and Art Market, which generally interests people very much. There are numerous Cloyson enamel shops and the master houses, kind of, where people can go and see how this Cloyson enamel is made. And of course, those beautiful parts of Georgia, Tbilisi, I mean, which are not included in the main classic trip. This is Sololaki district. This is the 18th, 19th century Georgia. Most of the buildings before annexation time, and then before the Bolsheviks won the revolution. So it's kind of a wonderful, flourishing Georgia that then got totally locked during the USSR history. And the part of Armenia area as well, which was built by the Germans, and it was not part of town at that time. It was kind of a village, but then because Tbilisi grew and it became larger and larger, this outskirt became the central part of Tbilisi. And if the guests are interested in Soviet heritage, of course, we have that later Soviet period buildings, the living houses that can be visited and taken a look at. And I lately find that people are also interested in visiting Georgian subway. So the not Russian, but Soviet period metro. So the metro, yeah, people can ride metro, and also the cable cars that connect different parts of the towns. So it's having a 4-night stay in Tbilisi really makes it worse, because there are so many little things that guests can go see and enjoy.
Exactly. And so you mentioned the subway, because it is quite unique and different. We provide a transport card as well, so that you really have the flexibility sort of take in the whole city. A lot of it, though, the central part is walkable. You couldn't see it too well from the pictures, but you know, there is a mountain in the middle of the city. There's a cable car that goes up where you have great views over the surrounding area. This was something fun that we did. We also enjoyed the sulfur baths. These are right in the center of town, and they date back a long time, I think, these sulfur baths, do they not?
Yeah, they come from the 17th century. They were built according to the Turkish hammam architecture, and about 2 million liters of sulfur water flow there every day. And yes, it's a very good thing to go and have this experience of the sulfur bath with the kissa massage. That is actually basically the scrub, really a heavy scrub. Yes. Yeah. And yeah, as one of the we see this sulfur bath on the picture right now on the slide. So yes, this beautiful sulfur bath, 1 hour spent there, is invigorating and giving you energy for the next week or something.
Exactly. So it's a good thing to do. In fact, if you're there for 4 nights, you might even want to go twice. I personally love these things. We had quite a laugh going the last time. And as Katuna mentioned, history museum. There's dedicated to the Soviet occupation of Georgia for all those years. Many different aspects to Georgia and history that we can find here. So it's a great, and it's nice in the middle of the trip or the middle of the trip to have this time in Tbilisi. We then head out, we drive north up into the high Caucasus Mountains. These next couple of pictures were actually taken by me. This was taken by a drone, and you can see Mount Kazbegi itself at 5,000 meters above sea level. So you are really up in the high mountains here. The hotel that we stay at basically has this view overlooking the Gergeti Church, which I'll talk about in a second down here, and the amazing mountains. And a lot of people forget that the Caucasus Mountains are actually the highest mountains in Europe. They are higher than the Alps, and so we get a great sense of it as we spend a couple of nights in here, and we will drive up to this church, and you can't see it too clearly down there, but that's our Wheel and Anchor members that were with me the last time we went. As I say, I took a little drone shot here at Gergeti Church. What can you tell us generally about Stepantsminda and Gergeti and our experience here up in the mountains?
Gergeti Trinity Church is a 14th century church, and it is built of the local stone, which is not as soft as the sandstone and not as colorful as the sandstone, the architecture of which we'll have seen already in Tbilisi. But as you mentioned before, the Georgians were very good at choosing the locations for the churches. And the top location of the church is marvelous because you overlook the area, the settlement of Kazbegi from one side of the church, and from another side of the church, you see this beautiful mount summit of the Kazbegi. So the people here, in every country, we have the peripheries where people speak different dialects. So we have the same here. So Kakhetian dialect, the first couple of days is different, and Tbilisian dialect is different. And here the dialect is different as well. But the main thing here is that when the people talk, even me as a Georgian, I think they are fighting because they are, mountain people are different. So they really speak with all their energy, and you think that there is something wrong, but actually it's not. So they are very hospitable people. And Kazbegi area, as you mentioned in the introduction, it's the area that borders with Russia. So the border with the countries that were not under Russian government before the USSR was formed, the border lied there. So we Georgians and the mountain tribes had this road from the pre-Christian times. And this Dari Ali gorge, that is the border crossing area at the moment, it comes from the ancient Alans. The name comes from the ancient Alans. It's the narrowest gorge in the Great Caucasus and a well-chosen border point. And we see the gushing rivers here, the crazy mountain rivers indeed, and the watersheds and the waterfalls. So it really wows when you go there. You know what the huge mountains look like, but once you are there and you see the grandeur of these mountains, it really impresses everybody.
Yeah, and that was our recollection as well. We were all very, I mean, we've all seen mountains before, but the Caucasus have a different, very imposing feel to them. So as I say, we'll spend a couple of nights there. Again, a change from what we did previously. We had a lot of tours only spend one night here, but there's so much more to see that having a full day to go all the way from the Russian border and explore this whole area around is absolutely worth it. We'll then drive back south and over west, heading towards Borjomi. On the way, we'll stop in a little town called Gori, which was the birthplace of Stalin. And I remember we visited the Stalin Museum there, and the reception we got was, no, what can I say, very Russian. But
still the same Soviet feeling.
In any event, we didn't spend a lot of time there, but it was interesting to just sort of step inside this house that Stalin was born in, and all of the memorabilia and well, propaganda and so on and so forth at the time. And it just, again, thinking about in the context of today and world affairs, it's a particularly interesting stop. We then get to Borjomi, which is in much lower hills, but still a beautiful little town. What makes Borjomi so interesting?
Well, it's the Lesser Caucasus that we'll be visiting while being in Borjomi now. So we finished with the Great Caucasus. Now we are to the Lesser Caucasus. So the Lesser Caucasus Mountains, they are about 20 million years old, which is a good age for the mountains compared to 5 million of the Great Caucasus that is very young. So here, everything seems more mature. But of course, that's not the main point for visiting Borjomi. Borjomi was found as a mineral water town. So we have this sulfur water coming out of ground here, very good for different diseases, they say. And during the Russian period, pre-USSR, during the Tsarist Russian period, Nicholas II, he decided to found a town here with all the spa and mineral waters around. He even built a narrow gauge train, and a French architecture who built the Eiffel Tower. You know, he was invited to build the bridge for this narrow gauge train. And now the nature, the forest around Borjomi and these mineral waters, they combined, they really make a different feeling and a different atmosphere that everyone loves to enjoy. It's a very special place for Georgians to go in summer as well, because we think that it's very good for children, for asthma problems, and for some breathing problems. So a lot of people, not only foreigners, but the locals, go there to have their holidays.
Indeed, it's a great last stop in Georgia. And as I say, I also sipped from the famous Borjomi water, which doesn't taste very good, but they say it's like a fountain view. And so I definitely felt younger afterwards. So you'll have to go and try it out for yourself. I don't think you're going to want to drink a whole glass full of it, though. It's
no, they say either you love it or you hate it. So I've seen mostly those who hate it, including myself. But yeah, they say it's very good for health.
Indeed, indeed. So those will be our last 2 nights in Georgia before we head to Armenia. But before leaving, we have a bit of a long day, but a super, super cool day. We're going to be visiting, first of all, in the morning on this day, Akhaltsikhe, which has this amazing castle, which is like, it's one of those castles where you're like, now that is a castle that looks like a castle. It's very, very cool, called Rabati. But in the afternoon, we're coming here to Vardzia. And again, this is a shot I took myself with my drone of this amazing cave complex. Can you say a few words about Vardzia, please?
Yes, in the 12th century, Georgian King III had only born daughter. So he didn't have any sons. And he thought that Tamar, she was so clever and so strong that she could rule the country. Of course, you can imagine in the 12th century how many people were against that. But anyway, he was a king, he decided, and Tamar became the queen. But the history says that she was such a brilliant ruler that we don't call her Queen Tamar. We call her King Tamar, although she was a female. And together with her father, before he died, because he made sure that she ruled during his life so that no one attacked her, they decided to build a secret town under the cliff, so that when Georgia was besieged by the enemy, people could have somewhere to go and hide. Not only people, but also the jewels of the country, the gilded icons, and all these very expensive stuff for those period. So the name Vardzia actually comes from this Queen King Tamar. The legend says that during the process of building this cave town, she was lost, and the soldiers and the entire army of the king, they were calling out for her, and she replied, "Ak Vardzia," that in translations mean "Uncle, I'm here." So Vardzia means "Uncle, I'm here." And as many things in Georgia are related to Tamar, the name of this cave town was also related to Tamar, naming it as Vardzia Cave Town. But the facts on the table, the cave town had about 50,000 caves with living quarters, refectories, church, marketplaces, pharmacy stores, and all those included in. And then sadly, after building it in about 80 years, there was a huge earthquake which took part of the cave town down to the river, with all its huge cliff taken away by water. And this is how we see it now. And this is how it ended up actually after the earthquake. So now we see about 500 caves, a little bit more maybe, but not the capacity that it had in its beautiful days.
Yeah. It's an amazing place to visit, and we really thoroughly enjoyed our visit there the last time, and as we will next year when we go. From here, we drive across the border and come into Armenia. Relatively easy border crossing formalities there, and we'll arrive that evening and spend a couple of nights in Gyumri. And this is a new stop for me. We didn't go to Gyumri last time because we took the long way around, and instead we're taking sort of a shortcut through the mountains. And Gyumri, as I understand it, is the second largest city, and they call it the cultural capital of Armenia. Tell us a little bit about it, Khatuna.
Gyumri is the second largest city in Armenia now, but it was a small town during the Tsarist Russian times. It's named after the Tsar Nicholas I's wife, Princess Alexandra Fyodorovna. It was called Alexandropol, and only after Russo-Turkish War it was renamed as Gyumri. And it has that beautiful black fortress. It's about 8 kilometers from the border of Turkey, and it became very heavily populated town during this Turkish-Russo war. And the town is beautiful with its already Armenian, very characteristic architecture, with its museum and the cultural sisters, Aslamazian sisters galleries that we are going to visit during the trip. And this border town, peripheric town, feeling that reaches you when you cross the border is just magnificent, because although there is only a couple of kilometers difference with Georgia, you already see how different this first town is from what you see in Georgia.
It's amazing, the countries being so close together, but really everything, the architecture is different, the culture, the mannerisms of the way of the people, and yet thankfully the relations between Georgia and Armenia are quite friendly. Not so much the case between Armenia and some of her neighbors, but that's a whole other story. And so Armenia has such an interesting, unique history in terms of how it evolved and everything that we went through, and Gyumri. And this is a picture of the Black Palace that we see here, which is one of the most, the Black Fortress, excuse me, that one of the most famous buildings in the town. And it'll begin to give us a little bit of a sense of what Armenia is all about. And then we'll come to Yerevan, which quite honestly, very pleasantly surprised me when we first went there. I didn't really know what to expect, but talk about a lively, bustling, growing, really exciting town. Maybe you want to say a few words about Armenia, and then I'll share kind of our experiences and what we took from our last visit there.
Yes, well, Armenia officially was the first Christian, first Christian country. Yeah. In 301, they became the officially first Christian country in the world. So they really are very tight with their religion, and they really have wonderful churches. Different than Georgian churches, because in Georgia you see a lot of murals, while in Armenia you already see less murals, but beautiful artwork on the stone. And the khachkars, that are their wonderful gravestones with all the crosses, it's just marvelous. So when you go to Yerevan and you bring all this information with you already, because we'd see Echmiadzin, the first built church of Armenia before we reach Yerevan, and these ancient Zvartnots ruins, and then we get to this modern pink tough stone architectural beauty of Yerevan. It is really very impressive. And as the country is on the territory where the ancient Urartuans were settled, there are a lot of ancient Urartu archaeological sites and the remains from the ancient pre-Christian history.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point that I was going to talk about, is the fact that you have the early history, and yet at the same time you have sort of the modern history, if you will, everything that's transpired in the last 100 years since the First World War, and one of the things that really took us aback as visitors there was when we visited the National Museum, and there is a huge section that delves into the Armenian genocide that quite honestly somehow was missed from my education of history. But I was really, really taken aback about, what transpired during this period of the conflict with Turkey back during the First World, or the Ottomans, I should say, at the time, during the First World War. And it left us all with a really different impression of the people of the country and what they've had to endure over all of these years. And in the context then today of the troubles that continue to go on with Azerbaijan, that are all based from some of these earlier conflicts between the Ottomans with the Turks and then the Russians and all the rest of it. It seems like Armenia has been caught in between, and that's, I think, what contributes to it being such a fascinating place. And in the meantime as well, you have what we found at the end of this park that you see at the bottom left of the picture here. They have this incredible art gallery that is terraced up the side of a mountain, with some sculptures from South American artists, and Bolero and a bunch of other guys that really, we didn't have enough time. Once again, we extended the trip here so we would have 3 nights, 2 full days, really to take in as much as we could about Yerevan. And of course, the city is backdropped by, you can see up in the top right of the picture, that's Mount Ararat, which actually sits inside Turkey, and is the, as we all know, the famous landing place of Noah's Ark from the Bible. So we'll have a lot of different things to see that we see in there. There's also some geological features like this, as they call it, the Symphony of Stones. These basalt columns that are in this hexagonal shape that formed when this volcano collapsed. So many different things. We'll taste Ararat brandy, one of the famous products from the country that is produced right in Yerevan. Many different things to take in the couple of days that we spend there, and so much more that we could share. But at the same time, I want to wrap things up and give you some of the logistical details, and also make sure that you get a chance to ask any questions about this trip, why you should go, and any other logistical questions that you might have. Here's a great shot, by the way, Mount Ararat in the back here. It's a very imposing mountain. The Armenians still think belongs to them, so this is one of these long unresolved things. This program here, all of course the details in our program itinerary, that if you didn't already see it, we'll send it out to you with the replay of this webinar. So this program here in Canadian dollars, you can see is quite reasonably priced, happening at the beginning of October. This is the best time of the year to visit the Caucasus region, and as I say, included in, as usual, we have all the accommodation in lovely hotels, most of which I have been in before, so I can say firsthand they're terrific accommodations. We have typically lunch or a breakfast and either lunch or dinner every day, which is generally enough, except on the free days when you might want to actually fast because you will have eaten so much food on the other days. And of course, English-speaking guides throughout, one in Georgia and one in Armenia, and our host that will accompany you throughout the trip. So all we need to do for you, in addition, is your airfare and taxes, and you need to take care of an e-visa for Armenia, which is really quite simple, and of course insurance. Getting over there, just to give you a sense, I think the rates here that we posted are probably a little bit high for the West Coast, but nevertheless, this gives you a little bit of orientation in terms of budgeting for this trip, what you can expect. I do suggest, again, and on the topic of airfare, and I know that some of our members did it the last time, you could fly, for example, via Istanbul into Georgia, spend a couple of days there if you haven't been to the city, or maybe you're coming with us to Turkey next month. But there's ways to get there and break up the journey a bit because of the odd hours flight timings that from Europe. We are happy to have worked out a early booking bonus with Katuna and her team, so we'll be offering you $200 off for those of you who sign up for this trip before the end of September. And I'm optimistic that we will, because we've launched it a year and more than a year in advance, that we'll get enough people to sign up. And I do hope you'll join us because it's a great trip. We're about to take some questions, Paula. And of course, if you can always reach out to Paula and Barb to answer any of your questions. But now Katuna and I will answer those questions that you have.
Yes, we've got a couple here that have come in, Gordon. Sita is asking, do the sulfur baths smell?
Yes, they do.
They do.
Yeah.
It's part of the experience, right?
It's part of the experience. Yes. It's not that bad. You kind of get used to it, sort of, but they smell right from even when you're approaching the whole sulfur bath section of town. Yeah, it's
yeah, they smell. And also what is very important is that some of the rooms that we can go into have warm pools and cold pools as well. So cold pool is a natural water. Not natural, well, natural but not sulfur water. And then when you are in the cold pool, the smell is less, of course, but then overall, as Gordon says, even from the distance, you can smell that you're approaching the sulfur bath.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, perfect. My experience, you do get used to it, kind of thing.
It's not that bad.
No. Helen has a question here with regards to the Georgia border, bordering Russia. What is your comment in terms of the safety within the region?
Shall I answer that, or?
Yeah, why don't you
Yeah.
say your perspective? You're there, so you're living next to Russia.
Yes.
People living close by are a little bit nervous. I'll give you my perspective, but Katuna, you tell us your thoughts.
Yes, well, to be honest, we in the 21st century, there is, in terms of being afraid of, it's to be afraid of the air rather than the land borders. So there is no problem with the land border at all. And when we go in to closer to the border, we do not go very close to it either. So we go to see it from a distance, but we do not approach it. But it's not the way in terms of any escalations, political escalations, that this road will not be used for any military activities, let's say so. So it's different areas, which if we hypothetically say that Georgia might be attacked by Russia, hypothetically, it's the other areas that they will use rather than this border.
Yeah, exactly. And I think practically speaking, my personal perspective on it is Russia certainly has its hands full and got more than they bargained for in their current activities.
Exactly.
And so none of the other countries that border Russia, be it the Baltic states or Georgia, are really feeling at this point that there's any imminent threats. But we keep an eye on it, like anything. You never know. Global politics is always changing.
Yes.
At the same time, we are pretty confident, and the Georgians are certainly a very strong folk, and they're not going to be pushed over this time as happened 100 years ago. So I think they're pretty good to go.
No, and yes, the safety of our guests is the priority for us. So if anything happens prior to the tour, it will be us first who will inform you that there is something going on, it's not safe, and you'd better not travel. So if that is kind of how we do.
Exactly. That's how we do, and we
Perfect.
keep an eye on these things very strictly, and obviously we take all precautions. So perfect. Okay, good. I think we've addressed that point.
Yes, we've got a couple other.
Okay,
go ahead, Gordon.
No. So you go ahead.
Sorry, we've got a lag. Sita was wanting to reconfirm the date of the early booking deadline.
End of September 30th.
Perfect. A couple other questions here with regards to the language in Armenia and Georgia, and how easy it is to communicate in English if people venture off during their free time.
Yes, well, Georgia has its own language and alphabet, and most of the names are written in Georgian and in English, because international language is English. The same in Armenia. Armenians have their own language and their own alphabet, and the signs there as well are written in Armenian and English. But in the capitals, generally, the youth speaks fluent English. So I do not think that people having the free time will have any problems with getting around, because they can always ask the locals. The older generation speaks more Russian, but the younger generation, they all speak English. So it will be rather easy to go around.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Couple more questions.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you want to say something, Gordon?
No, I have nothing else to say. Katuna answered the question perfectly.
Okay. Yeah, a couple more questions here. Someone was asking with regards to packing, how would you recommend packing for the weather that members will experience at this time of year?
Generally, at the end of September and the beginning of October, we have really warm autumn days. So weather from year to year is unpredictable, to be honest. But generally speaking, we have about 20, 18 degrees Celsius, Celsius at that time of the year. And we might have some cold days while we are in the mountains. So it's better to have early autumn clothes as well as some warm jumpers for the mountains.
Yeah, exactly. We found the temperature, we went at exactly the same time. And it's warm in Kakheti, it's fairly warm in Tbilisi, definitely cooler in the mountains, whether it's the high Caucasus or even crossing over into Armenia. But the temperature is perfect for traveling, quite honestly.
Fabulous. Good. Last question I've got here so far is with regards to the activity level, members were asking what is the terrain like? What should they be prepared for in terms of comfortable walking shoes and such?
So I'll let Katuna speak to that as well. My perspective is that this trip would be moderate. So our usual sort of standard of amount of walking that we do would apply here. The only places that are a wee bit more challenging is when you get up, like for example, to the Vardsia caves. It's all there's all walkways and railings in most of the spots. But there is stairs, and it's in some places a wee bit slippery, but it's we definitely had one or two members who were a little bit uncomfortable going too far into the complex, but you get the sense of it from standing right outside and just seeing sort of I would say that it's not inordinately difficult.
Perfect. Yes. I've got another question I'm going to squeeze in here that's popped up. Members asking if credit cards are accepted in most places / everywhere, or would it be recommended to have cash to use in certain locations?
Mainly, the credit cards are accepted in the larger cities, towns, and at all the restaurants and the museums. But it's never bad to have some cash with you just in case some of the small souvenir shops or some of the small other grocery shops do not have these up in the peripheral areas, like in the villages of Kazbegi or around Gyumri, somewhere like that. But generally speaking, most of the towns, at all the museums, restaurants, shops, they have the credit card machines.
Perfect. Secondary, more popping in here. Secondary question with regards to payment, is the Wise card accepted there?
You can always use the Wise card. It is a credit card. So the Wise card, to my knowledge, does not currently support those currencies directly in terms of inside their system, but it doesn't matter because it'll just, if you have a Wise card and you have a $1,000 balance or in Canadian dollar, it will just deduct automatically. So you can certainly use the Wise card, even if the currency is not loaded on it. So no problem with that.
Perfect. And one other question here we have is what is the guideline for tipping or gratuities?
Well, as with all of our trips, the gratuities for all services that are part of our trip are included, so you don't really have to worry about that. Katuna, in terms of folks, leaving a tip at a restaurant or whatever, what would be customary in Georgia?
Well, to be honest, it depends on how satisfied you are. It's not like US that wherever you go, you have to leave the tip. So it's not like that. So if you didn't like any kind of services, you just can walk out and don't leave any tips. No one will say anything about that. But if you are happy with the services, it's about from 5 to 10% of the bill that would be welcome as a tip.
There you go. Perfect. Okay,
awesome.
good.
That is everything so far. A lot of this and more is also answered in our additional information document. So feel free to reach out to Barb or myself, and we can share that with members that are interested in digging a little bit deeper to consider joining us on this very unique trip. And yeah, and that's it for me. I'll pass it back over to you, Gord.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I want to thank everybody, in particular Katuna, from joining us all the way in the evening on Thursday from Georgia. Please do consider coming with us on this amazing trip next year. It is really an amazing destination, and I'm confident that we'll get a nice group of people together, and we'll have a marvelous time in Georgia, in Armenia. I think, Paula, you just posted some of the upcoming webinars. Yeah.
Yes,
so there are just a final note. There's a couple of webinars coming up that you'll see there. You can sign up for them if you're interested in going with us to Tahiti next year, because we have a full group for this year, and similarly for Japan as well, and Greece. So as usual, lots of webinars in the works for you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Katuna, once again,
thank you very much. Thank you. So everyone who is interested in Georgia and Armenia and in our region, we are so happy about that. We'll be very happy to welcome you. As our legends say, the guests are sent from God, and so Georgians and Armenians really love the guests. So you're welcome anytime, and thank you for the chance to participate in this webinar.
Thank you again, Katuna. Have yourselves a wonderful day. Bye for now.